In 2019, Russia faced massive forest fires that were difficult to control. During one intense mission, a firefighting team became trapped by a wall of flames, so the captain, Alexei Sokolov, ordered his men to take cover under fire blankets and wait for help. In that moment of panic, one firefighter suddenly thought he saw an escape route and ignored the orders of Sokolov to stay still. The man then tried to run through the fire, but unfortunately he died in the process. A month later, the forest fires were still raging across the country. That day, Sokolov met with his commander to protest the fact that his team was not being sent out on missions. But the commander explained that because they were one member short following the recent tragedy, the team was required to stay on leave. He then told Sokolov to simply choose one of the 100 new recruits waiting outside if he wanted to continue the mission. But Sokolov refused while stating that he did not want an inexperienced kid and preferred a professional instead. The commander seemed irritated to hear that answer, and he just said that regulations required a team to have exactly 6 people before leaving. After leaving the commander's office, Sokolov went to find his daughter Katya, who worked in the department's communications office. Then, when he went to the office, she was not at her desk, but Sokolov noticed a bouquet of flowers and chocolates on her table. When he asked Katya's co-worker, he finally found out that Katya was dating a man named Roman Ilyin, and the two had been dating in secret for a long time. He also found out that to stay close to Katya, Roman had even registered to become a new firefighter. On the other hand, at the airplane hangar, Roman was trying to take Katya skydiving using the department's equipment, but soon after, Sokolov showed up and angrily ordered his daughter to get off the plane. When the pilot saw the anger on Sokolov's face, he quickly ran away to avoid the confrontation, but Roman tried to act friendly and introduce himself, only for Sokolov to remain cold to the young man. Then, after Katya left the hangar, Sokolov returned to Roman and threatened that if the man ever approached his daughter again, he would find himself jumping out of a plane without a parachute. Not long after, Sokolov met with a pilot named Valera and asked for a ride to the mission site, and even though he still hadn't found a 6th member, he suggested that Valera should just report 6 people on the report, implying that he wanted to continue on the mission even though he had to cheat the system. Unfortunately, the pilot refused to break the rules and insisted that the team must be complete first. Since he was in a difficult position, Sokolov met with the 4 members of his team, namely Maxim, who played the guitar, Kostik, a devoted family man, Sergei, the strong man of the group, and Pyotr, who was very quiet. Then, when Sokolov was trying to solve his staffing problem, he spotted Roman nearby and suddenly had an idea. He quickly pulled the young man aside and told him that he was now the newest member of his team, and because they had a mission starting immediately, Roman was told to be ready to leave in 5 minutes. While Roman was thrilled by the news that he would be going on a mission, when Katya heard about the arrangement from her friend, she was shocked, fearing that her father was forcing her boyfriend into a dangerous situation. She then rushed onto the runway to stop the plane, causing it to come to a halt to avoid hitting her. When they stopped, Roman mistakenly thought that she had come to cheer him out of love, so he stepped out and declared it was the happiest day of his life because he could finally work with her father. Fortunately, that helped calm her down. Once Katya calmed down, the team continued their journey, and they arrived near the fire site a few hours later. For this mission, Sokolov planned to stop the fire from spreading while Valera monitored the flames from the airfield. Then, Before the mission officially began, Sokolov performed a small ritual by lighting a wooden match, and he smiled as the fire began to die out. After that, Maxim explained to Roman that if the flame went out before reaching their fingers, it would be a sign that they would successfully complete their task. Once the ritual was over, the team quickly parachuted into the forest, but since it was the first time Roman had ever jumped, he ended up getting stuck in a tree. However, rather than offering him a hand, the other members simply laughed and told him he had to figure out how to get down on his own. That night, after setting up their camp, the team began the work of digging trenches to stop the fire's progress. Fortunately, because there was no wind at the time, the work felt manageable and the atmosphere was relatively calm. Sokolov then ordered Sergei to plant explosives to create a fire break, but as he was working on it, the wind suddenly blew, and that caused the fire to spread pretty fast. Unfortunately, even though the team managed to safely escape the fire, their tents and most of their belongings were all burned down. However, Pyotr was able to save Maxim's guitar and their satellite phone. When they investigated the cause of the sudden fire, they were shocked to find out that the local villagers had deliberately set the tree nearby in flames, and this led to a heated confrontation between the firefighters and the residents, as the team realized that the disaster was also caused by human activity rather than just nature. Seeing the tense argument begin to shift into a fight, Sokolov eventually stepped in to break up the fight and led his team away to find a place to rest. After that, because their equipment and tents had been burned down, they were forced to sleep in the cold forest without blankets. The next afternoon, Valera was about to patrol the area when his assistant informed him that the plane was low on fuel and could only make it back to headquarters. But to solve the problem, the man had actually rented an old helicopter that was still functional enough for a simple patrol. On the other hand, since their equipment had been lost in the fire, Sokolov ordered the rest of the team to head back to the village to borrow tools, leaving Roman behind to keep watch. When the team arrived at the village, they found the residents celebrating a wedding for the son of the village leader. But when the crowd saw them, they immediately went silent. Then, Sergei quickly explained that they had come to apologize for the fight from the night before, and asked if they could borrow some tools. At first, the village leader did not want to help them, but when Maxim offered to play his guitar and sing as payment for the equipment, everyone loved the music and started clapping, so the leader finally agreed to let them take what they needed. Back in the forest, when the others were away, Sokolov and Roman, who stayed behind, began to talk. On that occasion, Sokolov explained that his daughter was actually terrified of heights, which was why he was so angry when Roman asked her to skydive with him. Then, when the captain went to gather firewood, Roman secretly took the team's satellite phone to call Katya, because his own cell phone had no signal. He soon found a spot near a cliff, and their call finally connected. Roman quickly asked Katya why she never mentioned her fear of heights to him, and she told him that she just didn't want him to worry. However, while they were talking, Roman noticed the fire was moving very fast toward the village, but before he could report it, he accidentally dropped the phone into a lake below the cliff. At the same time, Valera flew over and saw the danger approaching the village, so he used his radio to warn Sokolov and told him to call headquarters for backup. He explained that since his plane was low on fuel, he couldn't stay to help and needed the team to get more men on the way. Upon hearing that, Sokolov signaled his location to Valera with a flare. He then quickly returned to their campsite to get the satellite phone, but when he went to grab the phone to call for help, he realized it was gone. He knew Roman must have taken it, so he rushed off to find the young man and warn the villagers. Meanwhile, inside the village, a pregnant woman named Zoya suddenly went into labor. Her mother quickly tried to find someone to drive her to the hospital, but almost all the men were too drunk from the wedding party. Even Zoya's father was in no condition to drive, and her husband had passed away. Seeing the emergency, Pyotr stepped up to help and quickly got Zoya onto an old bus to get her to safety. Sokolov arrived at the village shortly after and explained the situation to his team. After that, he ordered them to evacuate the residents quietly so that no one would panic. However, Roman suddenly came running in and started shouting to warn everyone. Fortunately, despite the scene he made, the villagers stayed surprisingly calm. Meanwhile, seeing the young man finally show up, Sokolov quickly asked about the missing satellite phone. Roman then admitted that he had been calling Katya and accidentally dropped the phone off a cliff. Sokolov was furious to hear that, and he immediately ripped the firefighter badge off Roman's uniform, kicking him off the team. After that, he asked the villagers to evacuate. On the other hand, back at the office, Katya was very worried because the call with Roman had been cut off so suddenly. Afraid that something terrible might have happened, she then went to the commander to report about it. Fortunately, Roman had mentioned his location earlier through the call, saying that the team was near a small village in the forest. The commander quickly checked his maps to see if something had happened, and after seeing the map, he insisted that the village was safe and told her not to worry because there were much larger fires elsewhere. However, despite being told to stay quiet, Katya remained anxious. So, while the commander was busy in a meeting, she lied and told the staff that a high-ranking minister had arrived outside. Then, once the room was empty, she used the commander's phone to contact the satellite operator and ask for a real-time report on the fire in her father's area. When the report arrived soon after, the commander returned and saw the data. At that instant, he was shocked to see that the fire was spreading much faster than he thought. Knowing that the team was in danger, Katya then begged him to send a water plane to help, but he said that the planes were already tasked to protect a nearby factory. Hearing that, Katya argued, saying that the factory was empty and that the commander was only prioritizing it because the owner was rich. She then reminded him that many people were trapped in the village, and they needed their help the most. Fortunately, her words managed to move the commander's heart, so he finally changed his mind and assigned the planes to help Sokolov's team. On the other hand, back in the village, Sokolov stood silently as he watched the flames get closer. He realized that his calculations were wrong because the wind had caused the flames to progress faster. In that moment, he then tried to perform his match ritual one more time, but this time, the flame kept on going until it burned his finger. Seeing this, Sokolov and Kostik were terrified by this bad omen, but they knew they had to keep moving to get the residents out alive. Shortly after, Valera approached with his helicopter and reported that their planned pickup point had already burned down, and the only road leading to the town was also on fire, so the group had to find a different path. Upon knowing that, Sokolov quickly checked the map, and he saw a lake nearby that could be an evacuation point. However, the trail was too difficult for small children to walk, so he asked Valera to land and bring the children with him. Unfortunately, Valera refused because the helicopter was old and the engine might not start again if it stopped. As Sokolov thought about how to save the children while sitting on a pickup truck, an idea suddenly sparked in his mind. He decided to use the helicopter to lift the truck itself to evacuate the children, so it didn't have to land and turn off the engine. Thankfully, Valera agreed, thinking this would be possible to do. Valera then dropped ropes from the helicopter to tie the pickup truck. The team quickly buckled the carabiner to the truck, and the children and women were loaded on it. But when Valera tried to lift off, the helicopter wasn't strong enough to carry everyone. Because of this, the women had to get off, leaving only the children inside. Then, to keep the kids safe and calm, Maxim stayed in the truck with them. Valera then tried to lift the truck, but it wasn't high enough to avoid the trees. This made the children on the back really scared, but fortunately, the helicopter eventually managed to lift the truck into the air and fly towards safety. After that, Sokolov and the remaining villagers began the walk toward the lake. Meanwhile, Pyotr was still driving the bus toward the hospital, but he soon became worried when thick smoke covered the road. He wanted to turn back to the village, thinking it wasn't safe to continue. But Zoya's mother told him to keep going, since there were no visible flames yet. So, Pyotr continued the journey, but things got worse when fires began cornering them from every direction. To make matters worse, the burning bridge suddenly fell apart, and the bus almost plunged off it. The accident caused the bus to stop in an instant, and Pyotr fainted for a while from the impact. Meanwhile, Zoya's mother was in a panic because Zoya was about to give birth, so she tried her best to wake Pyotr up. Fortunately, he regained consciousness shortly after, and he helped Zoya deliver her baby, right there on the burning bus. When she finally managed to deliver her baby, Pyotr was deeply moved as Zoya's mother held the newborn. On the other hand, Valera's helicopter was still flying over the burning forest with the truck hanging below it, but suddenly one of the ropes snapped. Because the load was becoming unstable, Valera realized he had no choice but to lower the car immediately before the whole thing crashed. Because of the emergency, the old helicopter was forced to land, and Maxim quickly moved all the children from the truck into the helicopter. However, because it was still too heavy to take off, Maxim threw out all the supplies and extra gear to reduce the weight, yet the aircraft still would not fly. Since the fire was getting closer and the children were terrified, Maxim knew he had to do something else. He then smiled to calm the kids and told them to close their eyes and count to 3. As they began to count, the helicopter finally started to lift off and everyone cheered with joy. But they soon realized that Maxim had sacrificed himself by staying behind so the helicopter could escape. On the other side of the forest, the team led by Sokolov was now completely surrounded by the flames. In that moment, the village leader explained that the lake was only 200 meters away. But unfortunately, the path was blocked by fire that had caught up faster than expected. Knowing there was no other choice, Sokolov decided to take a heat-resistant rope and run through the flames to find a way to the water. He told Kostik that if he made it, he would fire a flare as a signal for everyone to follow the rope. However, if he did not return or signal within 2 minutes, it meant he had failed, and there was no way to the lake. After saying that, Sokolov then ran into the fire. Soon after, Sokolov actually reached the other side despite the obstacles, but when he tried to fire the flare to send the signal, the flare gun somehow jammed. Since it was his only bullet, he felt hopeless and collapsed in the forest. Back with the villagers, Kostik finally gave up hope after the 2 minutes passed. Then, assuming that Sokolov was dead, he quickly handed out fire blankets and told everyone to take cover, but just as the flames were closing in, Sokolov suddenly appeared with the last of his strength and told them that the lake was just ahead and they were almost there. Upon hearing that, Kostik quickly led the residents toward the lake, but when everyone had moved on, Roman saw that Sokolov had fainted from exhaustion. Since there was no one else to help, He quickly picked up the captain and carried him alone without thinking twice. At the same time, the commander's plane arrived above the lake, and Katya watched as the villagers jumped into the water to stay safe. But Roman or Sokolov was nowhere to be found. They then searched the forest. And fortunately, they eventually spotted Roman and Sokolov. In the end, everyone survived the fire except for Maxim.
No clean way out, so we held the ground, hands shaking, hearts steady, sirens fading down. We weren't chasing glory, we weren't trying to be brave, we just didn't run when the fire said stay.
The next morning, the commander and Katya returned to pick up the survivors, and the team was finally reunited after the fire was extinguished. A week passed after the fire incident, and that day, at the headquarters, the firefighters held a special ceremony to honor the memory of Maxim. A few days later, the villagers were seen working together to build a new housing complex near the lake where they had found safety. Meanwhile, at the fire department, life began to return to normal. Now that the fires in various regions were finally out, the commander could finally get some peaceful sleep. Meanwhile, outside, Pyotr was seen sitting with Zoya while they watched the new recruits train. Since the birth of her baby on the bus, the two had grown very close. On the other hand, in the cafeteria, Sergei finally worked up the courage to give flowers to the staff he liked and expressed his true feelings. As for Roman, he was finally given permission to take Katya skydiving. Before they got onto the plane, Sokolov simply told them to be careful. Before they left, Sokolov returned the firefighter badge he had torn off from Roman's uniform during the mission and apologized for his harshness. Roman was utterly touched by the gesture, and as a thank you, he gave his sunglasses to his future father-in-law. Not long after, Kostik was seen leading a brand new firefighting team as they prepared for a mission. It turned out that he had been promoted to captain, just like Sokolov. As the new team left, Sokolov prayed for the safety of his former teammate while lighting a wooden match. Watching the flames slowly go out, Sokolov smiled, knowing they were all safe.
No clean way out, no promise we'd return. Just trust in each other, lessons learned in burns. We weren't born for endings, we weren't made for fame. We were just a line that held when the exits failed, when the streets went quiet.